Kate, welcome to Political Hope.
Thank you. Nice to be with you, Indy.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the question to you that we start with is, what does political hope mean to you? But I think also it's like, how do we reimagine that word politics too? Because some of us kind of are like, wait, I'm not political, or I'm kind of. So yeah, what does political hope mean to you, Kate?
Wow. Well, I would say that up until the most recent presidential election, I considered myself pretty plugged in to the political landscape, what was happening. To kind of preserve my heart and my nervous system, I unplugged a year ago, and I have been on a pretty much of a news fast for the last year. I know what I need to know. My friends will tell me.
Of course.
Or I see headlines if I need them. But I've been pretty, disenchanted with what's happening in our country, and I see it from a much larger kind of a mythic perspective in terms of, hundreds and thousands of years, why we are where we are.
Yeah.
So I think that how we know ourselves politically right now will not solve the problems. So we have to reinvent ourselves. But before we can do that, I think that we're in for some, you know, some darkness.
Yeah, if not already. I mean, we see that already with some communities, and I think the population that you serve and you care about, we're seeing the impacts, right, on mental health, physical health, spiritual health, right?
And the hope part of it, Indy, let me just say
Please.
that because I'm a community builder and because I get to do this kind of magical work, I think of my work as an act of resistance.
Mm.
When what we create at the small scale sets the pattern for the whole system. That's Adrienne Marie Brown. And so I do believe that when we work in, small groups, larger groups, community groups, that we're actually affecting the whole system. So I'm committing myself to that.
I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I think reimagining hope as an act of resistance based on the ground, like really rooted in connection is
Yeah.
powerful. And I think there's I would like to reflect this to you too. There was something you mentioned on a podcast that you've done before, like an interview that really it stuck with me. And I feel like that's also a good way to reframe political hope is that you mentioned that the work that you do is building the infrastructure for social care.
Yeah.
I love that. Like, can you expound on that a little bit? Like,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'd love to. So I am the founder and current board chair of Village Movement California, and we are a coalition of 50 villages in the state of California, and there are about 300 nationwide. And villages are they're community-based organizations that connect people over the age of 60 with community resources, support, expertise, what they need to navigate the transitions of aging and to live independently on their own terms.
nice.
Most of us want to age in our own homes,
Mhm.
on our own terms, with people that we love. We don't want to go to nursing homes. We don't, those kinds of things. Well, the fact is that there are nearly 11 million older adults in California, which is about 25% of the population. And a lot of us, myself included, would really be kind of squarely in the moderate to middle income group.
Mhm.
I'm not a wealthy woman, but I'm not I'm poor. And so I don't qualify for publicly funded services, but I probably won't be able to afford them on my own either. So here I am squarely in the middle.
Yep.
And there have been reports, and one of them came out of the University of Chicago that called us the forgotten middle. And basically, this moderate to middle income group of older adults, there's about 35% of us in California, are not going to be able to afford what we need to age with dignity.
Mm.
And so villages are a way of bringing people together and building the social capital, the connections, the support, the love
Mhm.
that we need in order to age with dignity and get our needs met. And so I've been a community builder for 40 years. It's a long history, but basically what I mean by that is I help to build infrastructures for these kinds of relationships to flourish.
Mhm.
And it's intentional community building We come together as a group of people to create something that wasn't there before.
Mhm.
And we're not leaning on government and we're not leaning on, institutions that, quite frankly, haven't met our needs up until now and aren't going to in
Mhm.
the future. Um, and so it's an empowerment model. It's people coming together, especially later in life,
Mhm.
to say, I want more.
Mhm.
And I want, fulfillment in my later years. I want to have my needs met. I want to know that I'm safe and secure. And so villages, there are these 50 villages that I represent in the state of California. I suggest that they have built an infrastructure for delivering what we call social care.
Mhm.
And social care is different from healthcare, of course.
Mhm.
And it has to do with high quality connections, connections with volunteers, with resources, with, things that I don't know about,
Mhm.
other people, new friends, younger people, all different kinds of connections that are going to.
Activities are included in there?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Activities, education, being able to plan for my own future. I'm a big proponent of intentionality. And
Mm.
I talk a lot about being able to plan for the future that we prefer instead of a default future.
Yes, yes.
So if we don't pay attention to some of these questions as we get older, we're just going to live a life that we didn't plan and we don't want. And that's not what I want, and I think most people don't. Um, so yeah, so these infrastructures of so social care being high quality connections,
Mhm.
access. Access is everything, and that leads us into equity. Access to, resources that are going to support me in my plan for my future. Um, Many other ways in which we do this. Mutuality.
Yeah.
Um, Villages are built on principles of reciprocity and pro-social values. And by pro-social values, I mean empathy and volunteerism
Mm.
and interdependence, um, care. What? I used to run San Francisco Village for 13 years, and our mission statement at San Francisco Village is we operationalize love.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
That's so good.
we operationalize love for elders in an ageist society by mobilizing the power of intergenerational relationships and mutual support.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
So, yeah. And those are the things that make up an infrastructure, Indy. Intentionality, values, vision, having a very clear mission, and then constructing an operation around those things. It actually it works.
what are some of do you have any specific anecdotes or examples or just relative examples of how that has made somebody's life better or made their end of life better? Because I think at this point, as you said, 13 years,
Yeah.
you probably have seen people come and go too. How has that been experienced?
Oh, yeah. People would make that declaration all the time that belonging to this village has completely changed my life. I heard a woman recently say that she had lived in a particular neighborhood in San Francisco for 40 years, and up until the time she had joined the village, she had no sense of community. But since joining San Francisco Village, she had this very strong sense of community. She was surrounded by other people. She knew she could call on them. They could call on her. They were sharing the details and the intimacies of their lives with one another. And of course, this all depends on the individual. Some people approach this as kind of standoffish and kind of like, no, I just want to, sort of observe them over here. Other people will dive right in. You're going to get the experience that you create.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the beauty of it, is that it's a creative endeavor.
Mhm.
Um, there was another woman that I knew that had been a member of our village for a long time, like 12 or 13 years, and she had multiple sclerosis, and she lived in a rent-controlled fifth floor walk-up apartment.
Wow.
Just getting in and out of her apartment was becoming a struggle. And she couldn't get groceries and laundry done. The laundry was in the basement. And she called us like 10, 12 years ago and said, Is there a volunteer that could help me with weekly grocery shopping and getting my laundry done? And sure enough, a man, his name was Lawrence, he said, I'll do it. Well, to my knowledge, he's still doing it.
What?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Once a week. These two now love each other.
Oh my
They're
God.
integral parts of one another's lives. And he helps her, they go to the grocery store together. He carries the bags upstairs, he unloads them, he takes the laundry down to the basement, and it's just, I
Wow.
think it's a beautiful example. And from the volunteer's point of view, he's saying, I probably get more out of this than she does
Yeah.
because he's operationalizing love in his own life
Yeah.
and he's extending himself to another,
That's
which that's a wonderful strategy for mental health,
big time.
you know? Yeah.
Then, as you're explaining this too, what I'm wondering too, because maybe that to clarify this for listeners out there, so a village can it be? It can be both a physical location of people living together, but it also, as you're explaining, it almost seems like it's like a network that's localized as well. That they might be living spread out in a community or a city, but that's also being a village as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say almost 100% of villages are the latter. They're networks. People do not live in the same building. They do not live in the same neighborhood. Well, sometimes they live in the same neighborhood. I'll take that back. I mean, there are a lot of villages. Like I'm doing some work now with a group of villages in Washington, D.C. Now, Washington, D.C. is a fairly small geographic area. They currently have 13 villages,
What?
hyper local, and they're very attuned to a particular neighborhood. In San Francisco, we had this big village that was meeting the needs of, the 49 square miles. So we had members in every zip code. But for the most, everybody lives in their own home,
Right.
whether that's, a house that they own or an apartment they rent, or even some people live in senior housing, whatever it is. But they have this desire to
Right.
bring themselves forward because they're looking for that deeper sense of community. It's really not in our definition of community, it's not about proximity. It's about a heart connection.
Ah.
So people coming forward to say, I want to know you and I want to be known. And the other thing I will say about Villages Indy is that they run the gamut in size and the things that they provide. But all of our villages, what we have in common is that we've come together intentionally like this. We are based on these principles of reciprocity and pro-social values, and we all offer pretty much the same things,
Mhm.
which would be an educational and social program. So we allow people to come together to learn from each other,
Mhm.
to learn on topics we bring in outside people to make presentations and all that kind of stuff. Lots of social connection, a lot of social gathering, so that they're expressing themselves. We programs in artistic expression and meditation and, you know, Medicare and, just all whatever these things that we think are going to enrich a person's life. Okay, so that's the program. The second thing we all have in common is a volunteer program. So members volunteer to help each other, but we also recruit multi-generational volunteers from the larger community
Right.
to bring people together. And you and I could talk about the deep value of that.
Mhm.
Um, and it's amazing. Most villages, they clock something like 6, 7, 10,000 hours a year of volunteer service. And it makes a huge difference. Sometimes it's giving an elder a ride to a medical appointment or teaching them how to get on Zoom or how to order groceries so they don't have to go to the grocery store or, doing some physical labor around the house or just all kinds of things.
And this is more frictionless than like trying to do it with the government. Like there's all these like government like elderly care stuff. Is this easy? Is it more frictionless to do it with Village?
That's a really good question. Yes. Yes, I would say to not interact with a bureaucracy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know a bureaucracy that offers what we offer.
Mm.
Very high touch. We're very, person centric. Um, we're very emotionally intelligent.
Mm.
We're rooted in all of that.
Mhm.
We're not rooted in, I wouldn't even know how to describe like the friction of a bureaucracy, but very different. And so there's three things that really basically make up a village then. So it's this social and educational program, it's this volunteer program, and then it's resource and referral. So most of us do not have a clue about the aging terrain. It's it can be very scary, actually, to not know how to access services, to not know how to negotiate with a healthcare system, to
Mhm.
not know where I should turn if I'm hungry and I'm food insecure, to not know if I'm on the precipice of homelessness, what am I going to do?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of, scary things that we face as we get older. And so that's our goal is that we're this hub. We ask our members to contact us and we're going to walk you through it. And we're going to give you some resources to get you on the right path because navigating the terrain of getting older is a huge thing.
Big
Uh,
time.
and everything about getting older, it seems to me, I'm 70, and so
You look
much
great, Kate.
so much of it has to do with transitions.
Mm.
Changes in my health condition, changes in living situation,
Mm.
changes in family relationships, changes in the world. There's just so much. And so, how do we navigate those changes? And we believe by doing it in community, we're healthier and we're better for it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a level of resilience that is a part of it too, because I feel like in all the elders that I'm in deep relationship with, the part of the wisdom is experiencing the patterns and recognizing patterns within yourself and in the community, and whether it's conscious or subconscious, right? So having the community and the relationships, and also I really value that you guys focus on education, and I wonder how diverse your education is. I mean, I'm curious, what kind, like, you brought in meditation, right? And I think a lot of people are talking about that, but like, even I think that the government's still behind, like government services for seniors in terms of like providing these services. So what's unique with the education you guys provide, and how is it inclusive and diverse?
Well, it's going to be different at every village.
Of course.
So it depends upon the vision and the visionary leadership of any particular village. But what I would say when I was an executive director, and now that I am the voice for Village Movement California, I can I get the feedback from other people like, oh, you gave me a lot of new ideas I hadn't thought about before. So that's a good thing. Uh,
Hmm.
but we think about when I was at San Francisco Village, a lot of our programming was around expressive arts.
Hmm.
So we did visual arts, we did theater arts, we did movement classes. When during the pandemic, we did a improv class on Zoom,
What?
which was hilarious and wonderful. And so people were coming with wigs on,
Oh my God.
and just doing all kinds of voices and stuff as a way to just kind of move energy. I think that you could probably identify with this, that moving energy is such an important part
Mhm.
of our health so that
Mhm.
things don't get stuck, right?
Mhm.
And as we get older, I can tell you that a lot of things can get stuck and it shows up as pain,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
a frozen shoulder,
Mhm.
or, something that, we can't, it's intractable. We can't seem to solve it.
Mhm.
Um, and so keeping the energy flowing. So we do the expressive arts. We did a lot of writing classes, storytelling. Storytelling is a wonderful way for people to connect with each other, because you kind of connect at
Mhm.
those common roots, Like if I'm writing about something that happened in my past,
Mhm.
other people can say, "Oh, I had a similar experience," or so we do a lot of that kind of stuff. Um, as I said, movement, education around health and being in charge of our own health.
Mhm.
So we offered all kinds of alternatives. We did several classes on using cannabis.
What?
Yeah, we did some stuff around LSD or psilocybin.
What?
Yeah.
Cool.
Um, we connect people to the local brain health centers, because everybody's concerned about their brain health.
Mhm.
So things you can do to care for yourself, but also things to, where do I go if I suspect
Mhm.
that I'm having memory loss, that kind of thing. We did a lot of really wonderful programming in conjunction with college students, the University of San Francisco in particular, which was right up the street from
Right.
where, yeah. And we worked with different departments. We worked with masters in public health students who were interested in learning more about community care and what does that look like. So we would match them up with an elder. We would do
Cool.
group discussions together. I remember one time during the pandemic, we did a Zoom conversation with a group of public health students, and everybody was in such despair.
Mm,
And you remember at the time that
mhm,
was still in the
mhm,
the first Trump administration, and
mhm,
the denial of
mhm,
what was happening.
mhm,
And
mhm,
I remember this young man, probably 22 years old or something, and just looked at me with this like pleading in his eyes. And he says, "Have we always been lied to like this?" It was such a compelling moment for me, from a young person wanting to be reassured
mm.
that, what he was experiencing was not the end of the road,
Wow.
yeah. And which is, kind of the cool thing about bringing younger people and older people together is that sense of, for younger people, I think they're longing to know their elders for many reasons. But I think one of those reasons is they want to know that they're going to survive.
Yep.
An elder represents longevity.
Yep.
So just being able to find out, oh, you've survived a lot of trauma of your own and, all of that. But I think the other thing that they're looking for is what Michael Mead, he's a mythologist and storyteller.
I
He said,
love listening to him. Oh my God, Living Myth is so good.
yeah, yeah, he's one of my favorites.
Whenever I work on the farm, Kate, I would listen to him while I'm farming. It helps me so much.
Isn't that great? Well, one of the things, this is what I learned from him. He says that what younger people want from their elders is to have one foot in survival and
Mm,
the other foot in deep imagination. And what he means by that deep imagination is for elders to be able to bring that forward in a young person, to be able to look in their eyes, and say, tell me about your dreams, tell me about what you long for, tell me about what you imagine, and
mm.
how can I support you in getting there? Some of my best mentors, and one of them was when I started in the village movement. Um, was an older woman who recently died. But she was about 20, 25 years older than me. But what I would say about Gladys is that she loved me into being a leader.
Wow.
She could see something in me that I couldn't quite yet see about myself. I was risking it. I thought I could do it.
Yeah.
But Gladys saw it and she loved me into being. I think that's what elders can do for younger people.
Yeah,
Um,
that's beautiful that you're bringing this into the being because culturally that I come from the Punjabi culture and I grew up with my grandma in the home and like there's intergenerational, it's very rooted in our community that there's intergenerational relationships and it's very inherent in the culture, but when we came to America it's become harder and harder, right? Like I'm seeing it in a lot of communities. The elders are kind of separated, and sometimes they're just coming in to help out, babysit, basically, right? The little kids, but there isn't really. It's losing its the mojo or the magic, right? And yet at the same time. I am also seeing that there is a resurgence in, like some of the spiritual community in the Sikhi community wanting to create elderly housing for their community and just recognizing that there is a challenge that the elderly, even though we have it so rooted to take care of our elders, there's something happening where the elders are not being taken, even though there's money and there's resources, it's not happening. So I'm wondering what you're noticing in there in that aspect of these different cultural communities that are lacking this type of elderly care and elderly networking and are you seeing some like changes happening with various cultures coming into this village movement?
yeah. Well, it's fascinating what you bring up, Indy, because to think about in your native culture, there's just this inherent multi-generational household or multi-generational family that interacts with one another. Come to the United States and it starts to fall apart.
Mhm.
So, my first reaction to that is kind of, the effects of capitalism and colonialism and narcissism and
Yeah.
all the other things that so much of American culture is rooted in.
Mhm.
And it doesn't sustain. We live in such a hyper individualistic society. People used to say to me, "What's your biggest challenge in growing the village movement?" And I would say that we're selling a model of interdependence in an individualistic society.
Wow.
And so there's this contrast or this contradiction for a lot of American people. Because what we know from social science and what we know from, soul activism and, deep mythology like Michael Meade is that we are connected.
Mhm.
It is the root of us.
Yeah. We
One,
literally share breath. We share the same air. We share the same, literally.
and yet we find ourselves, especially in 2025, in this radically separated uh, country, world. You know, the Surgeon General Vivek
Mhm,
Murthy,
mhm, mhm.
and he, came out with this advisory several years ago about the epidemic of social isolation and loneliness.
Totally.
And I see it constantly. I see it all the time. The thing that worries me now, Indy, is that we've moved from isolation to alienation,
Hmm, hmm.
that
Mm,
families are split and people are alienated. They can't see the humanity in one another. Um, One of my oldest teachers in community building was a guy named M. Scott Peck. And this was in the 80s. He wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled. That's what made him famous. Um, but in that book, he talks about how we are all connected at the level of our wounds.
oh,
So when, that kind of idea that what I can see in you is that you're longing too, you're feeling isolated too. You may be lonely, you may be disenfranchised in some way. If I can connect with you at that level and dispense with the judgment and dispense with the, assessing mind about it, but
right,
notice that,
right.
um, it allows a connection to take place.
Yeah.
And, so often what we would see, what I've seen in the village movement is that a younger person in their 20s or 30s have moved to California for a job and they had to leave their grandparents
Mhm,
behind or the parents, this sense of connection and belonging. And they need that in their life. They need
mhm.
something in their life to remind them that it's not just about work or it's not just about, and so they come together with an older person, and soon enough, they find out, oh, I'm lonely too,
Totally.
or I'm feeling displaced too,
Yeah.
or I wanted more than this and I didn't get it either,
Mm.
and that kind of connecting at that level of the heart,
Mhm.
it opens up so many more possibilities.
Yeah, and we're only one or two generations away from being in that type of village, right? The intergenerational villages. So there is definitely a longing and a connection that's still inherent in us, wherever we come from, right?
For sure.
Um, so I mean, I also want to point out too, because I was really honored to be able to join a conversation that was bringing in, I think this is really nuanced and it's especially special that I felt about the village movement that really made me feel this is politically hopey, or this is an infrastructure for social care. Because
Yeah.
you guys are talking about things that, just to give you some frame of reference too, Kate. So I am now, I've been selected to be on the advisory council on aging for the county of Contra Costa County. So, I'm going to all these meetings every month. That's basically deciding all the aging, all the resources that go to the aging and community all throughout Contra Costa. And one of the things, they've got a few different organizations that come giving presentations, the government organizations that provide services to seniors in the community. And one of the things they're noticing is that almost everybody who's benefiting is mostly white from the government services. They're getting very little like connection and integration with the communities that are Black, Brown, and Asian and whatnot. And they're like, why? They're like, why is this happening? How come we can't? Like, so even in that space, the money is mostly going not necessarily to everybody who needs it in the community, even though it's supposed to be going to the most marginalized, most vulnerable community, but it's not reaching. So
Yeah.
like I noticed you guys are really you're not aggressive is might not the right word, but this is really unique how you guys are going into the discomfort. You guys are stepping into the fire, right? Which is kind of being avoided in the more government bureaucratic spaces.
For sure. For sure. I think it scares a lot of people, and the word I would use, not aggressive, I would say conscious.
Conscious.
Yeah, we are confronting racism and anti-racism
Hmm. Hmm.
and inclusion. I have this colleague in DC that I've talked to. His name is Reverend Dr. Kendrick Curry, and he's the pastor of a church, a Baptist church. And we're talking, they're starting a village.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent.
And they're going to come and join us. They're going to join our incubator. We've developed an incubator for starting up villages.
Cool.
So they're joining us. And we were talking one day on the phone about equity and inclusion.
Mhm.
And he's like, these are hot button
Mhm.
words, especially here in DC.
Mhm.
And he said, so maybe, if we take advantage of that fact, we say, okay, what's different language? What's actually more inclusive
Mhm.
is a person-centered approach
Mm.
doing. So if we think about any person in the District of Columbia or any person, over the age of 60, any elder,
Mhm.
what are their needs? What do they need in order to feel empowered to age on their own terms? So that really opens it up for me, and I love that. But we have to confront what you're talking about, the historical racism in our country. And
And
I think,
systemic too. Like it's weird. Like why? Like here are these like taxpayer funded stuff, but it's still not reaching the people who like why? Why is that? That's weird.
well, I think it's because we're trying to dismantle institutions that have been in place for a long time.
Mhm.
And it's going to take more than some heartfelt conversations around it. My experience has been how hard it is for some older white people to do the introspective work that's
Mhm.
necessary. So, what I've learned as a privileged white woman of age 70 is that social change, or the social change that I want to see and I want to be part of, is kind of a three-staged approach.
Mhm.
It's with the inner, the introspection, me. It starts with the individual,
Mhm.
and then it moves into the interpersonal,
Mm.
me between the other, and then it moves into systemic.
Mm.
So I think when we're looking at change efforts, we might want to start with the systemic because we think that's where the biggest problem is.
Mm.
Truth is, it has to start with individuals.
Mhm.
Many, many, many individuals I've encountered, white individuals, older white people, um, are afraid or haven't practiced it, or it's beginner's mind,
Mhm.
or there's shame.
Mhm.
There's other, forces that are kind of keeping things in place. So trying to find, loving, compassionate ways to communicate with people about, what's possible when I will say there's been a tremendous amount of liberation in my own life
Mhm.
by looking at these things and from a perspective that was new to me, about historical racism and about systemic racism,
Mhm.
um, and kind of confronting some of those feelings inside I remember when I was at San Francisco Village and it was in 2020, remember that horrible
Oh yeah.
summer,
Mhm.
and started with the lockdown and
Mhm.
then George Floyd's murder and then the terrible wildfires
Mhm.
it was a terrible summer. And so I said to our team, the board and the staff, I, I want us to do a deep dive here, some diversity, equity, inclusion work, because the fact is that most villages are predominantly white.
Mhm.
And that was true for us at San Francisco Village. And we operate in a white dominant culture.
Mhm.
And we don't know what that means. It's the water we swim in,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we're unaware of what's happening at an unconscious level. So we brought in a consultant, and I remember her saying to me, "What is it you want to accomplish here?" And I said naively, "I want to make conscious what's unconscious."
Oh,
And so bringing it up
wow.
required a lot of discomfort for a lot of people,
A lot.
and some conflict, and some blaming,
Mm.
and some, you know,
Mhm.
don't make me go there.
Mm.
And it was hard.
Mhm.
but it certainly transformed my leadership and where we went with it, in terms of a new strategic plan, which centered equity.
Mhm.
We just called it out.
Yeah.
We want to build equitable community. What is going to be required of us to do that? And it's not a quick answer. And there's many things, many steps, many things that they're still doing. I left that job in March, but and they're still doing.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. It's a long-term commitment
Yeah.
to understand if we're going to. And I don't know if I said this earlier. My favorite quote from Adrienne Marie Brown is, "What we create at the small scale sets the pattern for the whole system." So that's in physics, that's fractals. So
Fractal.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So if it's existing at this, and so in organizing or in community development, this is a critical variable to success.
Hmm. Hmm.
If if the core team isn't experiencing equity,
Yep.
you're not going to be able to build equitable community,
Yep.
you know.
Yep.
So going again, interpersonal, systemic. It's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and that embodiment is it has to be practiced, and it's a one time is not enough. It's because we've been practicing other bad habits for a long time. We kind of it's you're gonna need a lot of time for those bad habits to diminish and good habits to form, right?
Absolutely. And to educate ourselves and our groups, do book groups,
Mhm.
read up on what is white fragility? What is that? What does it look like? How do I do that
Mhm.
inadvertently?
Yeah.
You know, um, read Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. Understand the systemic forces
Yeah.
that are at play for hundreds and thousands of years cross-culturally. So it's not this personal shame or blame that I feel. It's just, oh, I'm a part of something
Yeah.
that I don't approve of, I don't believe in. And what can I do to be a part of the change?
Oh my God, you're giving me a good idea for me to propose at our next advisory council meeting that we should start a book club for the advisory council and all the staff that are working in the different government for senior things. Like, be like, because that's an
Yeah.
interesting idea within the government for there to be a book club about this stuff.
Yeah, any group of people that's seeking to, affect real change,
Yeah.
education is a huge part of that. I have a colleague, a Black woman from Southern California. Her name's Carlene Davis, and she's been in public health space for a long time, and she knows a lot. And I was talking to her recently about this question around villages, and this kind of conundrum that we have about being predominantly white and why is that? And one of the reasons I think is that they're formed in neighborhoods or they're formed really hyper locally, and then friends tell friends. And,
Um,
and so if
mhm.
it's formed by this group of white people, they're going to tell their white friends, and they're not interacting cross-culturally. So that's kind of part of the spread. That's not an indictment, it's just an observation. And how might we change it up in those early stages? But the other thing Carlene pointed out too is that villages are place-based. Right.
Um,
And so if you look at the historical segregation in this country, like redlining,
mhm.
so, I live in Oakland,
Mhm.
and so West Oakland was the only place where Black people could live.
Totally.
The place they could buy a home. So if I'm going to start a village in Oakland and I'm in, a different part of Oakland, it's very difficult for people to cross
Totally.
those barriers. So there's geographic separation or geographic reasons for it. And again, it just requires attention,
Hmm. Hmm.
noticing. And so how do we work with that? Well, we reach across those
Yeah.
barriers and we introduce ourselves to some people that are leading in the Black neighborhoods
Yeah.
and say, we'd like to get to know you.
Yeah.
Is that of any interest to you?
Big time, and inviting them into the space. I mean, I remember pre-pandemic doing or organizing bringing food to a part of Oakland that was in a food desert and bringing fruits and vegetables there and actually setting up a stand. And that stand became a place for all these elderly folks to connect with each other because they were getting fruits and vegetables and asking questions. So sometimes just creating there, we could generate a space that creates that vortex for people to connect.
That's the intentionality part. That's the how do we bring people together? And usually there's some instrumental reason for it, like food
Mhm.
or, whatever it is that, we need. It's based in need.
Neat.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Or music. By the way, I would love to, it'd be fun one of these days to be able to go to different village communities that exist. And I want to share Ayurveda and like sound healing. There's so many gifts I have to share. So I just want to plant that seed with you and with the community to be able to volunteer and offer some services to the community. It'd be great.
How wonderful. We've got a new village starting up in Walnut Creek. You live in Contra Costa
I
County?
do. I live in Crockett, which is in,
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, well, let's connect offline and I'll be able to tell you where some of those villages are.
Amazing. Yeah, and we also need, I feel like this community, this unincorporated area has a lot of elderly folks that are very disconnected and not, they're lacking services actually. So I wonder what can happen here in Rodeo and Crockett and Port Costa as well.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, so much opportunity.
So much
Uh,
opportunity.
yeah, like our executive director, Carolyn Ross of Village Women California, she says, I want to see a village in every California county. So this is really yeah, it's our goal, and beyond. Now we're going beyond California.
Well, and that's a good segue. So what is your call, like what would be your call to action for folks out there listening from, and you got to remember there's different people listening. There might be people from the government listening, from the private, the equity, or I hate to say private equity, but private, private community, entrepreneurs or community members or healers, or there's various people, like young people, like and elderly people. Like what's your call to action for various groups to support this?
So on our website, we have a map of California, and it shows you where we currently have villages. There you go. That's where we currently have villages, and down below, I think they're listed. So you can connect with a village that already exists.
Mhm.
If you're interested in starting a village, you can contact us because, like we talked about before, we have an incubator. And the incubator that we started a few years ago is the only one of its kind in the country. And it's intended to cut startup time in half.
Wow.
Because starting a village is a big undertaking.
Hmm.
And you can bring a group of people together and then just kind of flounder for a while if you're not sure, where to go and how to do it. So we've developed a curriculum and a learning community. And within that learning community, there's peer support, mentoring, coaching,
Mhm.
all kinds of resources available to people. So, and not everybody's going to start a village. So, my top, headline advice is find a way to get connected if you're not currently connected.
Mhm.
And I know that's hard, but sometimes it happens through volunteering.
Mhm. Mhm.
My daughter's in between jobs right now, and she just started volunteering at the Alameda County Food Bank. And now she's like, she's this huge fan. She calls me all the time. She won't believe what I learned today, or who I met, or this wonderful experience that she's having of herself in connection with others. Um, there's a lot of, the faith-based community is kind of a logical place to go, but a lot of people are not connected to faith-based communities like we once were.
Mhm.
There's a wonderful, excuse me, there's a wonderful book that was written probably 40, 45 years ago called Bowling Alone.
Oh yeah, totally. I remember
Robert
that.
Putnam.
Mhm.
And he's in his 80s now, right? So they've done this documentary, an update on Bowling Alone. And I think the name of the documentary is Join or Die, which
Oh,
I hate the title, but that kind of comes from our founding fathers. I think that was some kind of phrase that they used. But his whole point is that, yeah, there you go. His whole point is that, we've things have eroded over the
mhm.
last several decades in terms of how Americans connect with one another.
Mhm. Mhm.
And but so many of the institutions are not there like they once were. So finding new ones
Yeah,
in your area, and I'm sorry that I don't have more specific guidance, but a Google search would probably, just kind of help and or talking to other people.
yeah,
Uh, I'm a networker. And so whenever I'm like faced with a big decision or something, I'm talking to lots of people.
totally. And I also wondered too, Kate, a part of me having this podcast is more than just a podcast. It's also an opportunity to do some heartstorming. And what I'm noticing, what I'm seeing in the cards, and I'm not the only one. There's very smart people that know this stuff even more than I do. That we're kind of in this economic crisis. Like we're in a multi-disaster, like the disasters stacking on top of each other, environmental and social and economic. And right now, I don't think people realize how much of their retirement funds, like the 401ks and the pension funds, how much of that money goes to like kill people around the world or cause environmental damage. One, all that money is going there. So a lot of them, like you mentioned, the middle class, like that money is actually being funding a lot of harm around the world. But also, what's going to happen this next year is that money's going to be able to be the mutual aid companies and everything are going to be able to put it into cryptocurrency or being able to put into like fake currencies and fake things. Like it's going to be that's becoming democratized, right? That's the language. So people don't realize that that's going to be the next bubble is people's pensions just disappearing overnight. And how can we actually be proactive about that? I mean, I even wonder if that's something that can be talked about in these village movement, some sort of class that can be offered of like, what is a better way to redirect our pensions and our 401ks to support village movements around California, for example?
Yeah, my short answer is I don't know, Indy. I don't know enough about finance at that level or economics. But certainly, all of our retirement funds are tied up in the bigger system. That's for sure. The truth is, we're all tied up in the bigger system as
We
well.
are. Yeah.
You know, we get Medicare for our insurance, and we're tied up in educational systems. So, and all the institutions. So there is a way of kind of locating ourselves, I think, within those institutions and finding a way from within
Hmm. Hmm.
that we can affect our immediate life.
Hmm.
This is where it starts for me. This is what drew me into community building to begin with,
Hmm.
was my own need.
Ah.
I was a young mom and with two children living 3,000 miles away from my parents and 6,000 miles away from my in-laws. So I was very lonely. I was very isolated. There was a lot I didn't know about being a parent or even about becoming the woman I wanted to become. And so I feel like it was divine intervention that I found a bulletin board that told me about something called a mother's club. And I called this number and I joined up and I met all these women and my life changed. And because I'm a social person, I'm very socially inclined. I think most of us are, though. I'm a social animal. And what I learned from studying sociology is that we become who we are in the reflection of other people. And so I'm constantly evolving as a person. I didn't like decide when I was 35, okay, I'm an adult now, so this is what I'm going to be
Yeah.
like. Like I'm constantly becoming.
Yeah.
And so at the age of 70, I need other people around me that are going to help me discover who am I now.
Right.
I think that's a huge part of aging, actually, is this sense of it's not just about, social connection, it's about connection to myself.
Hmm.
And so, what's important to me now? What do I value? And how can I be effective, maybe post work? So is that volunteering? Is that doing political work? Is that, caring for children? Is that somehow, my neighbor downstairs goes and cleans up Lake Merritt twice a week? So there's just these ways in which
Yeah.
I have to find that purpose for why I'm here and what it is I'm supposed to be part of. So, yeah, I think, kind of going back to my story about I joined this mothers club and then we had to move to New Jersey from Southern California. So here I was 3,000 miles away again, and I was isolated and lonely again, but I had this construct in
Hmm.
my lived experience that I know what it's like to be in community with other women. So I started a mother's club there and it was wildly successful. Long story short, I've started probably 50 mothers clubs in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, and they serve close to 2 million families over since the early 90s.
Wow.
And that was before the internet. And that was what kind of, so it was my pain
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
as Michael Mead would say,
Mhm.
the wound of the loneliness and the isolation is where my genius lives. So I wouldn't have known that I had skills for this or that this was my path, or except that I had to go through that deep loneliness in order to discover it. So, you know, that's been a gift I'm grateful for.
I'm glad that your wound turned into a community and a community for so many people, and that thing that's so powerful. Such a great. You're writing your myth. You're still writing your myth, and it's already written, and you're writing it. You're continuing to write it. And with that note, here's a quick question to kind of close out this interview and this discussion. Um, what do you imagine, Kate? What is the seed you're planting for, what's the glass ceiling that's being broken, for example, for this movement? Like, what is the best possible reality if things line up for the next 3, 4, 5 years? What happens with Village Movement California? Like, what are you imagining beyond yourself, as well?
Yeah. Well, I love that question actually, Indeed. So I would say as a pragmatist, um, what I imagine is that Village Movement California is successful at building a bridge
Hmm.
to healthcare, the very fragmented healthcare world. We like to say we operate at the intersection of healthcare and social care. And
Ooh.
that we know that healthcare professionals, providers, they know that so much of what their older patients require is social connection and transportation and support and love. They know that, but they don't know how to connect those two things. And so we're in the process now of trying to develop that dialogue or that value proposition, if you will, between what villages do and what healthcare does so that we can improve people's lives. And so I see myself working on that for at least the next 5 years.
Nice.
And I also, I think that the connection between villages and local governments is
Hmm.
a really important relationship.
Mhm.
It's not with state government or federal government, but locally, like county board of supervisors. And, you know, uh, I had a wonderful conversation with the president of the board of supervisors in San Mateo County a
Ah.
month ago. And San Mateo County is the first county in the country to declare that they have a crisis of loneliness in their county. And though they put it on paper, they made a declaration around it. And so now they're putting funding behind it to
Hmm.
say, what are we going to do to ameliorate the situation? And so, with the executive director of the Villages of San Mateo County, she and I went to visit this president of the Board of Soups to say, Villages of San Mateo County can make an enormous difference. And so, yeah, look at that, a public health emergency. So they're looking at so they've requested funding, and so the supervisors have put it on their agenda. So I think developing those kinds of relationships between this, I said I was at a conference recently that Kaiser put on. It was a healthy aging summit, and there was people on the stage, and they were talking about all these macro level
Mhm.
problems,
Mhm.
macro level loneliness and isolation and fragmentation of the system, and all of all these big high level problems. And my response to them, once they grabbed the microphone,
Mhm.
was, you know, the solution to these macro level problems is at the micro level.
Uh,
So, building
that's a
community
fractal thing. That's that fractal thing.
fractal thing. But when you connect people in their communities and when you empower them and you give them the resources that they need to be making changes in their own lives, it becomes not just consumer driven, but this people driven
Yep.
kind of solutions. Those are the solutions to these macro level problems.
Big time.
So my suggestion is fund these micro level
Yes.
enterprises
Yes.
like Villages and Village Movement California because we can one of the things we're really good at, Indy, is leveraging social capital.
Ah.
Villages are rooted in social capital. If you've got at San Francisco Village, we had 750 members 300 multi-generational volunteers, something like that. A community of about 1,000 people, 6 full-time staff members. So in my 50s, I went back to school and I got a master's in business. And so,
Nice. No,
I,
good neuroplasticity for you.
so I study social neuroscience and I also now I study finance. But being able to leverage
Yeah.
at that level, that's a really great business
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah.
We can make incredible effective change because of that social capital. Social capital meaning relationships, care, kindness. Um,
There was a note I actually wrote down because I'm in those places of reimagining and regenerating economics and reimagining economics, and relational capital was a note I wrote down earlier. And I feel like that's something that it seems that that's what Village Movement California is really building is
it's,
relational capital, which
it's,
is really hard to quantify because it takes time and it creates there's trust and vulnerability. There's all this nuance, right?
and those are the currencies of the realm.
Yeah.
Trust and vulnerability and compassion and empathy. It's all built on that. But we also have good metrics. We have a lot of metrics. We can talk about the difference that we're making. But again, we're kind of new. We're only 7 years into Village Movement California.
Only?
Yeah. So we have a lot more work to do in my lifetime
Let's go.
and
Well,
and beyond.
I'm grateful for this conversation. I think this is the first of many. I hope that we continue this conversation offline, and maybe there's an opportunity to come back. And if there's updates that are happening with the village movement, and then yeah, is there anything you want to share before we close this conversation? Is there anything else you want to share?
I don't think so. I'm delighted that you've taken interest. I really appreciate that so much. And I'm happy to hear that you're on a commission out there in Contra Costa County. They need people like you. I think you introduced yourself to us as a divergent thinker,
Yes.
and they need that, because this is where we're at. That's the future,
Yeah.
uh, is different ways of thinking about the conundrums that we're in.
Yeah.
Uh, so thank you for the work you do and for inviting me into it.
Okay, that's a great reflection. Because whenever I have my moment to comment during the advisory council meetings, I've now had one of the elders who actually works in behavioral health for many years and now trains people at Kaiser and John Muir. He reached out and had lunch with me, and he said, "I don't understand most of the words you're saying, but I'm really curious. I want to learn more." And he's an elder in the mental health realm for seniors, and so that means a lot that there is an openness of that we need to start thinking about things differently and approaching the problem differently. So I'm grateful that we all are. We're in this together.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what Michael Mead means by deep imagination. And that sense of curiosity, what a beautiful, it's a gift. I wish I'd like to see more of it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's more of us. We're waking up. We're waking up. We're gonna be we're the bridges to the next iteration. Sometimes we have to compost all the yucky stuff. We have to find out what's yucky to compost it, you know? So thank you, Kate, so much. I hope you have a beautiful day, and thank you so much for this movement. And folks out there, connect, volunteer, get tuned in. That's the best way. Just volunteer and show up.
Visit our website, look at that map. It's villagemovementcalifornia.org.
Beautiful. And I didn't even get to talk about ecology and nature and all that. So, oh my God, there's so many things that you get to talk about, but that's another for another conversation. Thank you,
Thank
Kate.
you. Bye-bye.